Good day and welcome to CIM's virtual event brought to you by the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee. Today, we will be talking about men as gender equality allies in mining. My name is Mary Lou Rabulis, Client Relations at CIM. Thank you for joining us. Some housekeeping before we get started. If you joined with your computer audio, make sure you selected the computer audio button on your control panel. If you dialed with a traditional phone, ensure the phone button is selected. During the presentation, you will be asked to participate in several polls. Please type or select the multiple choice answers in your poll box in the control panel. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the question box in the control panel. The questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. And now, without further ado, I would like to present the moderator for this session, Mafalda Arias. Mafalda Arias is the president of Mafalda Arias and Associates, an organization that coaches organizations and individuals to interact, communicate, and manage differences effectively. The company's innovative training programs help build trust, reduce misunderstandings, leverage diversity, and introduce collective empowerment through culture. Mafalda has over 25 years of international experience, primarily in the mining and mineral exportation sectors in Canada and Peru. Welcome, Mafalda.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our second webinar from the DIAC committee from CIM. It's a pleasure to have you join us virtually. Before we started, just wanted to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and it will be available at the CIM website soon after. In addition to this, you will be receiving the PDF of the presentation that we will be offering you today. You will get it by email later. The presentation will be about 30-35 minutes. And before we get started with it, I would like to ask you a question. I would like actually to know, where are you joining us? So if you can go to the chat version, go to the chat and type where you're joining. I'm going to type where I am. And I would like to know, where are you coming from? There we go. So I am based in Vancouver, but due to COVID-19, I am right now in Lima, Peru. What about you? Where are you coming? Let me see. Let's see where our guests are coming. Oh, California, Toronto. Look at all the members of CIA. Born in California, Toronto. Where else? Where else are you joining us? Let's see, people are going to start typing in the chat where are they joining us virtually today in our second webinar. Okay. Where else?
Mafalda, it looks like they're typing into the question so we can see Calgary, Sudbury,
Thank
Toronto.
you. I have to check that. Okay, there's somebody coming from Vancouver, Toronto. Looks like we have a lot of freaking flyers from Toronto. What's happening in Vancouver? Drillville, Ontario. Okay. Canada, Toronto. Drillville. And let's see in the chat. Is there some other places? No. Sydney, Australia. Look at how international is CIM. Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, London, UK, Cardiff, UK, Charlotte, North Carolina, Calgary, Alberta, Vancouver, BC, Montreal, Sudbury, Ontario, Brisbane, Australia, Salt Lake City, Utah. Oh my goodness, the letters are tiny. I cannot see this. The fonts are tiny. Vancouver, Oakville, Waterloo, Ontario, Toronto, and Zeta territory of the Kamloops. Yes, thank you, Secwepemc people in Kamloops. Fantastic, yay. This is great, thank you, fantastic. Okay, now, if maybe people are gonna keep on typing away, but I don't wanna, I like this participation from north, east, south, but I also wanna know a little bit, I would like to use one of the poll features, and I would like to know what is, Marilu, if you can launch the poll for us. So what is your knowledge on men as gender equality allies in mining? Select one of the 4 that you have there. How much do you know about this? Is this the first time you hear about it? You are aware of the topic, you have a moderate knowledge about it, you have heard it before, you have substantial knowledge, you're very aware, you have attended many presentations on the subject. Please click one of these answers. Share with us, where are you? Okay. Let's see, we're gonna see the result. They're gonna be coming soon as people are clicking away. Oh, the poll disappeared. Where did the poll go in my screen? Okay, perfect. We're having some results. 31% no sure. This is probably the first time they hear about the topic. This is great. That's always the first time. 28% said they have basic information, meaning they are aware of this topic. 38% moderate. They have read about the topic. Wow, a lot of awareness. And 3%, there's some expert substantial knowledge. Fantastic. So we have not precisely a bell curve, but we have a very good demonstration of various levels of knowledge about the subject. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for participating with us. Now it's time for me to introduce you to Humberto, our presenter today. So Humberto is Executive Director of White Ribbon Canada, and has a lot of experience in this subject. So, but I want to share with you is that Humberto has been doing gender-based prevention and human rights for over 20 years and 15 years with White Ribbon. So he has worked on multi-sites in different mines across Canada and globally, internationally. And he has done this type of work with mine managers, employees, with communities. So it's a whole realm of the stakeholder group that is involved in the areas of work that we do. And so Humberto, without further ado, thank you very much for coming. Welcome to our second DIAC webinar, and the space is all yours. Take it on.
Thank you so much, Mafalda and CIM colleagues, and to our audience for joining as well. It's a true pleasure to be here with you and to talk about the work that we do at White Ribbon with men and boys to promote gender equality, to end gender-based violence, and to promote healthy masculinity. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a presentation, and then I would love to engage in some discussion with you and consider your questions towards the end. So as Mafalda mentioned, I'm the executive director at White Ribbon, which is a not-for-profit organization, charitable organization based in Canada. The White Ribbon campaign was created almost 30 years ago now, 2 years after the tragic December 6, 1989 Montreal massacre, where 14 women were killed by a young man who didn't think that women should have a place in engineering. So he entered l'École Polytechnique de Montréal, and he brought a gun with him, and he entered an engineering classroom, and he asked the men in that classroom to leave, and then took out his gun and killed 14 women and injured many others, and then he took his own life. But he left a letter explaining his actions, and while he was shooting his victims, he was shouting, "I hate women, I hate feminists." And it was clear that he did this because he didn't feel like that women should have a place in engineering. And given the subject matter of this organization and mining in particular, this incident and the work that we do to prevent gender-based violence is very relevant to your workplace and the kind of work that you do. So here's the names of the 14 women that lost their lives and their pictures as well. And it's important that we remember. And in Canada, we have December 6th as the annual day of remembrance and action to end violence against women. So the White Ribbon campaign was created by...
Sorry, Humberto, we can't see your screen. I'm not sure what's happening.
Okay, so here we
go. You have
go.
Control of, there you go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay.
So apologies for that. So just take you through very quickly a picture of Montreal, of the L'École Polytechnique in 1989, the names of the 14 women that lost their lives in that terrible incident, and here's their pictures. And so the White Ribbon campaign was created by 3 men in Toronto who felt that that men and boys were largely absent from the conversation in the aftermath of the Montreal massacre. So they created a White Ribbon and this pledge to never commit, condone, or remain silent about men's violence against women as an opportunity to give men a chance to speak out on this issue in a visible way and make a commitment to change. So the idea of the White Ribbon as a campaign quickly took off across Canada, the US, and around the world. And today we know that White Ribbon campaign initiatives have been organized in over 60 countries around the world. So our vision is a future without gender-based violence. And our mission is to engage men and boys in preventing violence against women and girls, people of all genders. And we believe that every man and boy has a promise and potential to be part of the solution. So here's some projects and initiatives that we have organized over time. Our It Starts With You campaign, which focuses on the role that men can play as gender equitable role models for the young people around them. So we have an opportunity as dads, as family members, as educators, coaches, and community leaders to share, to partake supportive messages and actions of that are gender equitable and respectful with the young people around us. We do a lot of work that is focused on sexual violence and sexual harassment prevention. So we are part of the collaborative of organizations in Ontario that developed and implement a Draw the Line campaign with the support of the government of Ontario. And we are organize public awareness and education events such as Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, our annual fundraising and awareness raising walk. And these are some of the partners that we work with. And I'll talk a little bit more about our work, our previous work with Barrick Gold, but we have worked across a diverse group of educational institutions, government, United Nations, sports organizations, the Canadian Forces, and also a couple of really amazing organizations, the Canadian Council of Muslim Women and the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples. And we've developed this great resource together with the Congress called Walking in Her Moccasins, and it's a toolkit to engage Indigenous men and boys in ending gender-based violence and in promoting gender equality. So that's a little bit about our origins, our work, and I wanted to say that the work with men and boys wouldn't be possible for us and for many of us working in this field of work without the advocacy, the long-standing leadership and and strong allyship of the women's movement over time. So it is as a result of those changes and that strong advocacy that we can do this work today. So our appreciation to many of the women's organizations, to the feminist movement, to women leaders who have paved the road for us to be able to do this. So this issue is important to all of us, men included, because it has a significant impact on the workplace, right? So we know that 53% of degree holders in Canada are women, yet women are in a significant minority when it comes to leadership positions. So 25%, only 25% of those in positions of vice president are women. 15% of CEOs are women in Canada. So they're overrepresented in other areas of work, in particular in caregiving type of work, for example, childcare, and education and healthcare, nursing as an example. There's a significant gender divide and pay gap in professional roles. So even when women are, for example, overrepresented in the education sector or in the healthcare sector, they tend to get less pay than their male counterparts and don't have access to the kind of leadership positions that their male counterparts do. And I believe that this is even more exacerbated in the mining sector, in the extractive sectors, given the low representation of women within this sector. So something to pay attention to, and here's a first call to action for men in leadership positions within this sector, is to start having a look at who your managers are, your junior managers, your middle managers, your executives, and take a look at who is on your board of directors and start noticing, hopefully you have already, but start noticing the gender divide, and also racial divides and other forms of diversity. And you'll see that there's likely overrepresentation of men, white men for the most part, and underrepresentation of women, racialized women, members of the LGBTQ community, indigenous representatives, and so forth, as you go higher in those areas of responsibility and leadership. So men in leadership positions, it's time to start making changes within our workplaces so that we close this gap of representation. And we also know that there are higher rates of sexual harassment and workplace bias and violence experienced by women, racialized women, indigenous women, and members of the LGBTQI communities. So again, something to pay close attention to, and I'll talk about some things that can be done further on this. So in terms of prevalence, half of all Canadian women have experienced at least one incident of physical or sexual violence since the age of 16. And in 2016, 19% of women and 13% of men experienced harassment at work. Notice some of you will say, well, that's pretty close. Men are at 13% and women are at 19%. But if we look closer at the breakdown of these rates, we are likely to see higher rates of sexual harassment towards women and other forms of harassment towards men. And who's committing this harassment? You guessed it, primarily men. So men are overrepresented as perpetrators of harassment in the workplace towards women, towards men, towards LGBTQI folks, and so forth. Okay, so it is an issue that impacts all of us. So what is gender-based violence? Here's a quick definition for you. So it's violence it's an umbrella term used to emphasize that violence occurs because of gender norms, expectations, and unequal power relationships between genders in our society. So there are some different forms of violence there that happen in the workplace. So sexual violence, coercion, sexual harassment, exclusion, psychosocial violence, bullying, intimidation, verbal violence, threats, physical violence. All of these forms of violence can be gender-based violence if they're based on a person's gender or gender identity or sexual orientation. And what are the root causes of this violence and this discrimination? We know in general that this comes from gender inequality and patriarchy that is pervasive in our society. Social learning, we learn about this from a very young age. Harmful aspects of masculinity. So notice that I'm not calling a masculinity harmful here. It's just that some aspects of it in how we behave as men and boys is harmful towards others, and I will get into that in a little bit. Also rooted in racism, homophobia, and discrimination. So these are all intersecting causes that lead to higher rates of gender inequality and gender-based violence and harassment in the workplace. So we need to start moving to the question of, okay, so what can men do to address this, given that this exclusion and this inequality is primarily perpetrated by men? However, although we are part of this system of inequality and patriarchy that's so pervasive, and we often don't even realize this ourselves, we're all not necessarily intentionally causing this violence and this discrimination. So part of the first step that we need to take is to understand and learn about these issues and understand how they impact us, our roles in the workplace as managers, as colleagues, as CEOs, as board members, and then start thinking about what we can do to change this around so that it benefits those that are mostly disproportionately impacted by this form of discrimination, by this form of violence and harassment, but also that brings benefits to the organization, to the workforce, to the communities, and to the work that mining is supposed to do. So next, I'm going to ask Mary Lou to play a video as part of our Boys Don't Cry campaign. And just a warning, it may be difficult to watch for some of you if you haven't seen this PSA yet, but it helps to illustrate the kinds of pressures and gender stereotypes and stereotypical norms that we are affected by from a very young age. And as you watch this video, think about how these behaviors these impacts end up showing themselves in the workplace in terms of how men relate to their peers, to their co-workers, to the folks that report into them, and those that they report into. So Mary Lou, please play.
It's okay.
You got it? Pick it up with your big, strong muscles and bring it over here to the shop.
Boys can be loving.
There you go. Fast, 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 fast.
I need you to be brave, okay? Gotta go.
Boys can be shy. Boys can be sad.
Why are you crying?
Boys don't cry, right, honey? Be a big boy, please.
Boys can be self-conscious. Boys can be intelligent.
Why is it always about using words?
But boys can't be afraid. Boys can't be gentle.
I don't understand what the big deal is. I mean, isn't this just boys being boys?
Boys can't be weak. Boys can't be timid. can't be hurt. Boys can't look soft. Boys can't be powerless. Because boys don't cry.
So this video helps us to demonstrate again how gender stereotypes and pressures impact our lives from a very young age, and how this ends up, these kinds of behaviors, these kinds of learnings end up permeating all aspects of our adult life, and in many ways we bring these teachings, these ways of behaving and living with us into the workplace. And so it's important that that we have this understanding, because it is part of the kinds of harmful types of behaviors that I mentioned before, that often men exhibit in the workplace. So again, I don't intend to say that all men demonstrate these behaviors, but I'm sure that you can all relate one way or another to one of those aspects of or one of those gender norms, stereotypes that you saw in Boys Don't Cry. And here's a representation of what it means to be a real man, right? And again, a lot of these are relevant to the workplace as well. So a real man is stoic and emotive, is a player, is dominant, is strong, is perfect, doesn't take crap, is responsible, exhibits anger, fearless, has courage, planning, suck it up, and immovable, is a boss, is a sexpert, straight, romantic, and so forth, right? Is an earner, likes parties, is tough, again, territorial, doesn't hesitate, works in the trades, is handy, is a jack of all trades, right? So thinking about how this then plays out in the workplace, if someone grows up with these kinds of stereotypes and believing in this kind of behavior, then they're more likely to control their working relationships. They're more likely to dominate over others. They're more likely to not pay attention to their emotional needs, and to be stoic, and to be less empathetic towards the needs of others, may see women and members of the LGBTQ and racialized communities as inferior. And we know that when men try to step outside of these kinds of stereotypes, they're often teased and harassed, and they're ignored, they're bullied. Notice the homophobia, the terms that are used to call men who don't fit into this box, right? So deeply homophobic terms like fag and softy and girly, chicken shit, and all of that stuff, pansy, which are very common as put downs and offensive, deeply offensive terms that men use towards each other, to put them back into that box. And we know that, again, this is reinforced by media, by history, by our parents, by our friends, by school, sports, leaders, careers, religion, workforce, right? In a primarily male-dominated workforce, we see a lot of these kinds of behaviors. And of course, those of you working in HR, you recognize this kind of language as unacceptable. And when it's used towards others, it is considered sexual harassment and homophobic and racist and so forth. And it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be prevented in the first place. So what are the implications for men of this kind of upbringing, these gender norms and stereotypes, right? So this all results in an impossible construction of masculinity that we can never live up to. we feel pressure to perform, to act, to prove ourselves against this false construction of our gender identity. And men often use coping mechanisms that are not always healthy, right? The use of alcohol and risk-taking behaviors, which in drug use, which in the context of the workplace create a tremendous amount of risk and health and safety challenges. And we know that men use these coping mechanisms definitely on their own personal time, but often in the workplace as well. And so some further implications, this is part of that system that I talked about earlier, patriarchy and sexism that causes harms to especially for women and girls and members of LGBTQ communities, but also causes a great deal of harm for ourselves as well, in that if we're not in touch with our emotions, if we always toughen it up, and if we don't look after our own health, and if we engage in those unhealthy risk-taking kind of behavior, especially in the workforce, we are putting ourselves at risk of a lack of health and lack of productivity, of being fired, and obviously of harming others. So hypermasculinity is killing all of us, and gender equality and the more humane, compassionate, real ideals of masculinity are what we need to aspire for. So when we start to engage men and boys in the workplace, this is one of the entry points. We start having these conversations, and this is especially important in male-dominated workplaces where men, for the most part, haven't had an opportunity to yet to talk about this, how our upbringings have affected our lives and the way that we relate to one another and interact with our peers in the workplace. So we know that more is expected of us as employers, as leaders, as managers. We've seen the impact of the resurgence of the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter more recently. We know that we cannot ignore this issue. So we need to move towards culture change, system change, engagement with employees around this. We need to do some soul searching as individuals in whatever role we play, whether we are just a peer or whether we're in a position of management or executive, or we're a board member responsible for the governance of the organization. So one of the areas of work that we work towards is helping men understand how they can be better allies. So how to help men make those changes with themselves, become more aware of these kinds of stereotypes and the impact that they have on our lives, and then what we can do to then be better allies and drive change at the individual and also at the systemic level within the workplace. So here's an example of some work that we did with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I'm going to ask Mary Lou to play the second video now. And this video demonstrates what it means to be men of quality and what our calls to action are for men everywhere. Please go ahead.
A quality player is not just fast, skilled, or determined. On the Toronto Maple Leafs, we measure quality by more than just hockey ability. True men of quality strive to be great role models, mentors, fathers, husbands, and sons. That's why we're proud to be partnered with White Ribbon, the world's largest movement of men and boys working together to end violence against women. Because this is not just a woman's issue, it's a problem for all of us to solve. Men of quality oppose words or actions that perpetuate gender inequality. We're making a commitment to all women to end violence and discrimination in all of its forms.
For all women, I'll always stand up for gender equality. For our community, I'll challenge racism, homophobia, transphobia, and sexism.
For my mother, Judy, I'll teach my children about healthy relationships and consent.
For my wife, Alana, I'll encourage men to support gender equality at home and in the community.
For all women, I'll set a good example for young men.
For all women,
I'll set a good example for young men.
I'll set a good example for young men.
Join the Toronto Maple Leafs in a pledge to end violence against women. Working together, we will help achieve gender equality for all the women in our lives and in our communities.
Wonderful. So moving from what causes gender inequality and what we know leads to men behaving in these ways to alternatives that we share with men, right? So these are really great examples of what it means to be an ally, right? To speak out against gender-based violence, to promote gender equality in the community, at home, in the workplace, to speak out against homophobia and transphobia and racism, to be good role models for the young people in our lives. So applying all of these calls to action to the workplace means to bring these principles to our interactions in our everyday work life. Again, some images from our Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, and here you see different representations of athletes, of men in the business community, of police officers, emergency officers coming together and virtually walking a mile in her shoes as a sign of demonstrating allyship and solidarity. So some very quick then ways to promote gender equality in the workplace and engage men and boys. Just a few more minutes, and then we're going to turn over to your questions. So we need to address this concept of male privilege and understand in the workplace as peers, as managers, as leaders, that women, racialized folks, and members of the LGBT community have all of these extra things that stand in the way, right? The discrimination, the harassment, the gender-based violence, the exclusion that prevent them from reaching their goals of advancement, of high representation within a workplace, remaining with the company for a longer period of time, and so forth. So we have to start removing these barriers along the way, and men have a significant role to play, working alongside with their counterparts to remove those barriers. So we had an opportunity to do some work together with BEREC in their mine sites in Tanzania, Papua New Guinea, and northeastern Nevada. And we worked across those sites with the workforce, with the leaders, with management, with HR, but also with the surrounding community to address gender-based violence in the workplace, sexual harassment. And we did some really amazing work, put together a sexual harassment prevention program that every new employee has to go through as they joined the company. We worked together with community agencies to raise awareness in the community, because we know that gender-based violence at home also spills into the workplace and vice versa. And we did some work, really great work together on culture change with the corporate head office in Toronto. And so we did that by first asking men to be part of the solution, helping men understand how this impacts them, understand the role they can play. We raised awareness of the root causes. We questioned through the kinds of curriculum and engagements. We questioned those harmful social norms. We designed culturally relevant approaches to each mine site that took into consideration the key gaps and opportunities that existed in each community. And then we implemented, tested, and scaled up. So we always ask men, what will you do to be a gender equality ally and an agent of change within your community? And if we had more time, we would engage now in a conversation around this. So given everything that I've shared with you, what can you do as a gender equality ally and an agent of change in your workplace and in your community, and especially address the underrepresentation of women, of LGBTQ community members, of members of racialized community, indigenous peoples in the workplace? So what are some innovative ways you can engage with your peers, with the leadership? How can you be an ally and stand up for what is right? And how can you bring those men of qualities to your interactions in the boardrooms, in meeting rooms? How to make sure that roles and responsibilities are equally divided, that, for example, your female employees aren't, or colleagues aren't always left to clean up after meetings, or they're not relegated to taking minutes at every single meeting. Things like that, we would talk further about. So I just want to leave you with this quick list. What can you do? And thinking at high level, work towards systems of culture change. It's not sufficient to bring more women and diverse folks into the workplace without first engaging in some soul searching within the company and looking at your policies and your recruitment and advancement processes, and engage in culture change. And this is hard work, and it takes time, and it often means getting some outside help. And this is something we can definitely help with. We've done that kind of work. At an individual level, we always talk about, let's start with ourselves. Let's question our own attitudes and behaviors. Let's lead by example, be good role models, right? And demonstrate those good qualities. Men of quality is those good qualities are part of your role and responsibility, regardless of whether you're on the front lines of mining or in the boardroom or in an executive position. Speak out and intervene, so recognize and address forms of sexism, harassment, and bias in the workplace. And of course, never use force, threats, coercion, manipulation, or violence in those interactions. And celebrate diversity and inclusion. Celebrate International Women's Day. If you're in Canada or even abroad, recognize December 6th and help your employees understand the connection between gender-based violence and horrible attitudes and incidents like the December 6, 1989 massacre in Montreal. Look at International Women's Day. Look at Pride Week. Look at Father's Day, and use those dates as opportunities to further engage with your workforce on equity issues. Uphold your employer's code of conduct, and if you're in HR, you need to make sure you review that code of conduct to check to see if there's any gaps or any barriers there. A lot of companies have gotten into trouble because the code of conduct is outdated, is not reflective of today's issues, and what it doesn't reflect what we are expected to do when employees come forward and seek support to address experiences of harassment, violence, discrimination. And lastly but not least, believe and support survivors and promote accountability. So when people come forward and they share a terrible experience with you, believe them, offer to support them. Don't question. It's up to the investigators and to the courts to take next steps. But if someone shares a story and experience of harm and mistreatment, they want to hear words of support. You can do your best by saying things like, I believe you, thank you for your courage, what can I do to support you, what would you like me to do? And sometimes it just means staying with that information and supporting the person until they're ready to take further steps. So that's it for me. I would love to hear your questions and your comments on this, and happy to discuss further. Get in touch with me at White Ribbon. I know that a copy of this presentation will be made available to all of you. So thanks very much, and over to Mafalda and Mary Lou.
Great. Thank you, Humberto, for a fantastic presentation. Absolutely fantastic. Definitely, pay gap, it's a fact. It's here. the representation at management level as well as board level is very homogeneous. Absolutely, this is a demonstration that there is a power imbalance, that the causes of violence are very well known and determined, and it is very difficult to be a real man. It is very difficult. And absolutely how pivotal it is to start to have these difficult conversations with some kind of guidance, coaching that will help through the process. So phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. So before we go into the questions that the group is already gathering, I have a couple of polls for you. And so I'm going to ask Mary Lou and Elaine to help me with that. And the first one is, so we have listened to this. Rumors and intimidations in the workplace are forms of gender violence. What do you think, true or false? Let's hear from you. Very quickly, just Rick, one click away. Okay, how are we doing? Are people responding? I'm not able to see this. Let's see. Oh yeah, true, perfect. 96%, perfect, great. Let's go to the next one. Next poll. Okay. Good audience. They've been paying attention. Absolutely. Engagement topic. Okay. What percentage of Canadian women experienced harassment at work in 2016? Let's see. Let's see how good of a classroom we had here. What do you think? Yeah, they've been listening. Okay. Let's give a couple more minutes, couple more seconds, a little bit more. Okay. So yes, you had a good audience. 64% says 19. Okay, let's go to the next one. Perfect, thank you. What percentage of Canadian men experience harassment at work? How about that? 79, 80, 80%, 13, 12%, 3%, 8% of men, 81. Okay. Yes, I think we also got the good the right answer. 78%. Yes, 13%. Good audience. They've been listening. Good teacher, good audience. Can we ask for anything more? Okay. Let's go to the last one, the last poll before we go into questions and answers. So now that you have participated in this professional development webinar about this topic, men as gender allies, have you learned something? You didn't learn anything new? Was this informative? You've learned something new? Substantial impact. You're going to do something about it at work. You're going to implement something, start something. Okay. Very positive response. So 54%, they have learned something new. This is good. That means we are on track. We're learning. We're giving some value to you. We're keeping all our senses in tune to really act and move diversity forward. Thank you. Fantastic. Okay, let's now go into the question section of your chat, and let's see if there's any questions that we have from the audience. The slides are going to be afterwards. Yes, they will be afterwards. Okay, so I have one question as people are typing away. In your view, Humberto, how does environmental impact in the context of mining and extractive intersect with gender equality, gender-based violence? How can this be mitigated?
Well, that's a really good question. And I would say there are two areas of intersection between environmental impact and gender-based violence. One that we know in many parts of the world, even in Canada, in more remote areas, women carry a large degree of burden when it comes to caregiving, when it comes to looking after the family, and so forth. So when there is an impact on, for example, local farming or availability of products, or new communities being created, we know that women are disproportionately impacted by those changes. So it's definitely something that mining companies, extractive companies need to keep in mind as you set up operations in any particular area. The other area of impact, of course, is often there is a correlation between fly-in, fly-out arrangements for employees in a particular community and increased rates of violence both at home and in the community because of the degree of isolation that employees experience and that kind of separation. For example, long shifts we found to be a factor in men's use of violence in the home as well, because they come home tired and they describe it as they don't have the patience to handle conflict and challenges and so forth. We also found that so that impact is directly related to gender equality and gender-based violence. Now, in terms of impact on the environment itself, one of those stereotypical harmful notions is that men are not always aware of the impact of their work or of the changes to the local land and the environment. So that is part of that kind of harmful risk-taking set of behaviors that men engage in. It's part of what is expected of us, that we just, we go into an area and we just, take possession of it without often having a great deal of concern for how our actions impact on the land and local communities and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question here. Oh, what happened to the questions? Okay. And that's my 5-minute warning. So, okay, where did it go? So, while working toward gender equality in the majority male identified workplaces, any tips on reduction of locker room talk, posters, anything? So, can you share something with us?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And again, this is about setting expectations and defining what a professional workplace is. And to talk about those, locker rooms, lobbies, even, areas where employees congregate to wait for their transportation to the mine site. That is all part of the workplace, and that employers need to expect professional behavior at all times. And that means not engaging in discriminatory, offensive kind of banter with each other, not engage in rumors or sometimes in sexual type of assault and harassment towards other male employees, not just towards female employees in that case, right? So it's about having clear expectations, again, looking at the code of conduct and making sure that those spaces are included, that employees know to expect that professional behavior at all times, and then have the accountability process in place as well. So if someone breaks the code of conduct, then they need to respond, and based on the severity of that breach, it may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination.
I have another question here. If men are abusers at home, should their employers be notified?
That's a good question, and the answer is yes. Yes, because there's a couple of things that in this particular case that you can never truly separate violence and harassment at home from the workplace, and often employers experience that kind of transition and the impact from what goes on at home into the workplace. So for an example, if someone is experiencing using violence in the home, their mental health may not be very good. They may come to the workplace tired and upset, and that may then have an impact on productivity or on health and safety, on risk-taking behaviors. So absolutely, the employer should be informed and involved. And again, from a prevention standpoint, the expectation for employees is that not only do they need to be professional in the workplace, they also need to be respectful and peaceful and engage in healthy interactions in the community and at home. The other impact of this is on reputational impact for an organization and for the employer. If the employer is known to employ someone who is using violence at home, that may bring reputational dispute in the local community, because often that violence is also the risk of it is increased as a result of some of those workplace expectations, the long shifts, the hard kind of work, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, this is learned behavior. So if you have a bad example like that, other people learn from that. Even so it's really urgent. Okay, so we're about 2 minutes, and so we don't have any more time for questions. However, if you have any question that is absolutely burning that haven't been addressed, please send it over. We're capturing the chat, and we know who sent the question, and so Humberto will email you your answer later. It's been a pleasure to have you, Humberto, with us, to have all of you. We have, about 44 people from so many different parts of the world that are CIM members that are participating in the second webinar from the DIAC committee. It's a treat. And we also would like to let you know that this is going to be a continuous professional development that the DIAC committee from CIM is doing. So we're going to be offering multiple webinars like this one once a month. The next one is coming up for November 25th. November 25th. So mark your calendar so you can already have it there. And it's going to be about leading with empathy. What an appropriate connection with such a difficult topic like this one. So what we're giving you is tools, tips, ideas, best practices of things that you can do to change, to start that culture of change at work and be more inclusive. And I don't think we have anything more to add, and we are right on the time. So thank you for joining this evening. Have a good, safe day. Looking forward to the next time with you. Have a good night. Take care. Until next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.